Everyone, this is Nikachu, and we are here for a sideboard guide for October 2017. If you want to see what is going to be for mono blue before we go crazy with blue-green Merfolk decks, or if you don't believe in any of that blue-green Simic stuff and you want to stay true to the pure blue, well, this is the deck for you. And I would love to thank so much in advance to all my patrons supporting me on Patreon, all my viewers, all my subscribers. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. That motivates me to make these sideboard guides. So what I'm offering is basically what I was playtesting up to the last Modern Challenge. I know that the result wasn't fantastic, but I do strongly believe in this deck. I mean, the deck is pretty stock. If we look, we've got, we're still playing with 20 lands. We're playing with Gemstone Caverns. Love Gemstone Caverns still. We've got pretty stock number of creatures, but the thing that shines is the 3 phantasmal images. I want to be really low to the ground. I want to be very aggressive. I want to put myself in positions to beat Titan Shift. We were in position. We were in position in the Modern Challenge. Unfortunately, the game still didn't play out perfectly as we needed it to, but we were in position to win those matches. And the card is cheap enough that allows us to take advantage of our really low-to-the-ground sideboard cards that we're going to get into. But it's really Lord-heavy. I'm playing with 4 Mara Rejuries, 4 Lord of Atlantis, 4 Master of the Pearl Trident, and with 3 Phantasmal Image, you can have really explosive starts. We're only playing with 3 Master of Waves, but with Phantasmal Image, you can have a ton of tokens on the board anyway. I want to warn you guys, though, Phantasmal Image is a complicated card. It's a clunky card, and I think if you're playing it properly, it should be clunky, because you want to really hold off before you want to be sure that this thing is going to survive, or if it's not going to survive, that you're going to get the proper value out of it. Or you need to, if you know you're up against something like Jund, make sure that you are guaranteed to get a card off of it with Silvergill Adept. You know, if they're tapped out, copy Silvergill Adept. Get the value that you need out of this card so that if it ever gets targeted, it's not going to be a big deal. Usually just 1-for-1 removal, not a big deal, because, you know, our entire deck loses to, like, removal anyway, so that's not hard. But I'm just saying, you know, you be careful with Phantasmal Image. The power's there, but with great power comes great responsibility. And I believe in this card because not only do I have good personal results, but also Jan Gudenhaus, who made top 8 with Merfolk in a 400-player German tournament, and we're seeing some results on Magic the Gathering Online, with players going deep or going 5-0 with Phantasmal Image. And I am hearing, you know, here and there people, they don't like Phantasmal Image, but then other people are getting results with Phantasmal Image. So anyway, I believe in the card. I just believe in the card right now. I know for a long time I said, you know, this card is trash, but just right now I'm comfortable to play it, and I'm so confident in playing it that I have 3 in the deck. And we're playing with this member. This member is just very good, and our sideboard strategy, like I said, we want to be very low to the ground. We're playing with Ceremonious Rejection. We're playing with 4 of them. We're playing with 4 Dispel, 4 Relic of Progenitus. These are cheap 1-mana interactive spells, and we're playing with 3 Disdainful Stroke. It helps against a lot of combo decks, and as you see through the guide, it actually is played against a ton of stuff, but most importantly, it's there for Titan Shift. So let's get on with the guide. If you've never seen this before, I'm going to try to explain why we're bringing things in, why we're taking things out. So against Grixis Death Shadow, which is actually the topic of the Merfolk Strategy Guide for this month, if you're a patron. Grixis Death Shadow, we're going to bring in 4 Dispel. Interacts very well with a lot of cards. Cantrips like Thought Scour. That's not really what we're bringing it in for, but it counters Kolaghan's Command, Terminate, Fatal Push. So it interacts very, very well with those things, especially Kolaghan's Command. You really don't want that thing to go off. We're bringing 4 Relic of Progenitus because it interacts with a lot of their creatures. Tassiger, Gurmag Angler. They won't be able to cast those very easily if you have a Relic on the board, and it just wipes out Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage is what gives the deck so much, you know, extra card advantage. but it's completely disabled while there's relics on the board. I also like the fact that, Relic of Progenitus against decks with a lot of discard effects is well invested on the board. Like if you play Relic on the board, it's like a card sitting on the table instead of your hand. Whereas, something like even Dispel can, over the course of the game, just get removed from your hand with Collective Brutality or Inquisition or Thoughtseize. So Relic is nice and safe on the board. It's an investment we can make on the board. And we're taking out Aether Vial. This is an attrition-based matchup. I can see Aether Vial being like sort of playable, especially on the draw, but it's not mandatory, so we're taking it out, and I'm taking out Spreading Seas. So be careful with Phantasmal Image. Be very careful in this matchup with Phantasmal Image. I think it's playable, but you have to be very careful how you use it. Make sure that you get value off of it, because it can get sniped down by like Liliana the Last Hope and Liliana the Veil. Try to copy a Mutavault if you can, or something like that. Or get a Master of Waves in and try to copy that thing. So we're going to, against Eldrazi-tron, we're bringing in the Ceremonious Rejections. Great against Eldrazi-tron. We very easily can get a nice clock on the board, and then with 1 mana up, counter something important and close the game out the next turn. And Disdainful Stroke, also very good against Eldrazi-tron. I know they have Cavern of Souls, but they can't name Cavern of Souls everything. They can't name the Ballistas and their Eldrazi's, and it doesn't affect things like All Is Dust. What's it called? Basilisk Collar. There's a lot of gray or brown cards in their deck that Ceremonious Rejection hits, so it's a great card against Eldrazi-tron. And Disdainful Stroke basically hits a lot of their things. It still hits all Is Dust, can hit the Eldrazi. Usually the players are not expecting it, so they'll play like a Ballista for 4 or more. The smart thing to do, if they know that we have it, is to play for 2 and then make it bigger, but that's just how it is. It costs more mana if they want to do it that way, but that's the only way they can get under the Disdainful Stroke. Usually the Disdainful Stroke is very live against them. We're going to take out 4 Curse Catcher, they're low impact. We're going to take out 1 Aether Vial because they bring in Pithing Needle against us, and we want to reduce some of our Pithing Needle liabilities, and I'm taking out 1 Master of Waves. I'm going to keep some Master of Waves in because they play with Ratchet Bomb, and I don't want to be too dedicated on 2 mana and 3 mana with this deck. Ratchet, especially 2 mana, can just blow up everything. So if we at least have 1 Master of Waves, I know it can. Traditionally, people don't like it because, the Master of Waves can get shot down by a Walking Ballista so easily. I don't know about that, because if you're playing with so many Lords, it actually overloads the Walking Ballista. I don't have that big of an issue against Walking Ballista. So I want just a few Master of Waves for the situations where we might be in trouble against them. They got Ghost Quarters and a bunch of creatures out. We can't get Spreading Seas on the board. We're going to play those Master of Waves, go make a billion tokens, go super wide, and kill them. Bant Eldrazi, not seen very much these days, but if we are going to be up against it on the play, we're going to take out the Gemstone Caverns because they are a Path to Exile deck, and the Gemstone Caverns doesn't really matter so much, so we can go down to 19 lands. We'll bring in, I'm not entirely sure about this, but we'll bring in 2 Ceremonious Rejections. They also run Cavern of Souls, and they have way less brown spells for us to counter, but they do still have Engineered Explosives that they look for on a pretty consistent basis with Ancient Stirrings, so probably they will be live in that situation. I'm not going to bring in too many because I don't know how good they are in this situation, but that's what I'm going to do. And we're going to take out 1 Curse Catcher. On the draw, we're going to bring in the Gemstone Caverns because we would like to get ahead on mana very quickly. They're cheating on mana on Eldrazi Temple, and we all know how much people hate that card, according to my comment section. And so, so on the draw, we're going to take out 2 Curse Catchers, and we'll still have 2 Ceremonious Rejections, but we're going to bring that Gemstone Caverns in on the draw. Against the Affinity, we're going to bring in 4 Ceremonious Rejections. We're going to take out 3 Master of Waves, and because we're taking out the top end of our deck, we'll take out the Gemstone Caverns. It's... whoops, I'm going to adjust this, because we should have the Gemstone Caverns on the draw. I'll just make sure that I have it on the draw. So for the official guide, just make sure you go check this link to my Patreon page. So against burn, on the play, we're going to bring in 4 Dispel, and we're going to take out 3 Dismember and 1 Mararegery. The reason why, and on the draw, we're going to bring in 4 Dispel, take out the 3 Dismembers, and 1 Spreading Seas. And the reason for the big difference is Spreading Seas is so much worse on the draw against like Boros Burn, that I don't want it. I would rather have a creature. So on the play, we're going to keep all 4 Spreading Seas because we can get really ahead on mana, and they have a lot less mana to work with on the draw. But on the when we're on the draw, it really hurts us to like play Spreading Seas on turn 2, and then they may be ignored, and we just get hit with a lot of damage. So against Bogles, we're going to bring in 2 Dispels because they are going to be bringing in either Path to Exile or Dismember for our stuff. We'll take out 1 Dismember, leaving 2 in to deal with Core Spirit Dancer, and we'll take out 1 Curse Catcher because it's just a small body. Against Jund and Abzan, we're going to bring in 4 Relic of Progenitus, and we're going to take out 4 Aether Vial. There probably is room to bring in 2 Dispel against both these decks. If you want to, you can. I'm not entirely sure what I should be taking out. Should it be Harbinger of the Tide? Should it be some Curse Catchers? I'm not entirely sure, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So against Death and Taxes, normal mono white Death and Taxes, we're going to make no changes. There's nothing we can bring in that's really high impact. They have 4 Path to Exiles, but that's not enough reason for me to bring in the Dispels, because maybe they won't draw Path to Exile at all. So there'll be no changes against Death and Taxes. But against Eldrazi and Taxes, they have enough colorless spells, especially if they're playing with Thought-Knot Seer and Eldrazi Displacer and occasionally Wasteland Stranglers. So there's enough things that we can counter in that deck that I will bring in some Ceremonious Rejections and take out 2 Curse Catchers. But I don't want to go all in on too many of these things. There's always the risk of them playing Tide Hollow Sculler or Thought-Knot Seer. They look at our hand. For whatever reason, I don't have the mana up. They look at our hand, they see the Ceremonious Rejection, and then they just play around it as best as they can for the rest of the game. Against Blue-White Control, we're going to bring in 4 Dispels. We're going to bring in the 3 Disdainful Strokes. So, what can you counter in a Blue-White Control deck? Well, you can counter the Planeswalkers, like Jace, Architect of Thought, the big Gideon, Champion of Justice, I believe it is. You can counter Sphinx's Revelation. You can counter Cryptic Command. Has a lot of targets, and those are all the important spells, so that's why we're bringing in Disdainful Stroke. And Dispel hits the instant speed stuff, like Secure the Wastes, Sphinx's Revelation, maybe some counter spells, Cryptic Command. They will leave in a lot of counter spells. They'll probably even be bringing in Negates to deal with our non-creature spells. And the reason they have a lot of counterspells left in their deck is because not all the sideboards have a lot of good stuff to side in, and they're just forced to leave a bunch of counterspells on the main deck. I will take out Spreading Seas because it's not super important to... I mean, it's nice to be able to lock down a Colonnade, but you can't... They could, in the long game, just Detention Sphere them all away. So it's not super reliable, or they could get Engineered Explosive away. So, long term, it doesn't really matter. And we can't mana screw them anyway. They're just a 2-color deck. We'll take out the Gemstone Caverns. Yeah, play or draw, I'm not super confident with it. And because they're a Path to Exile deck, they will give us some lands anyway. So it's good to take out a land or 2 sometimes against Blue-White Control. And I'm going to take out 2 Dismembers. And you could most definitely bring in a few more if you start seeing some cards like Restoration Angel or Spell Queller. So this is very dependent on what you see against them post board. So you're gonna have 1 left, which is totally fine because you can sometimes kill a Wall of Omens or a Colonnade. Celestial Colonnade is really big. You have 2 creatures in play and you attack them into a Colonnade. They tap out to activate their Colonnade. You dismember it. That's a huge blowout. So moving on, we've got just normal Tron. We're going to bring in the Ceremonious Rejections, counters basically everything in their deck, and the Disdainful Strokes also counters basically everything on the deck. Taking out Dismembers, doesn't have enough targets, 3 Master of Waves because it's very clunky, and a Curse Catcher. Lantern Control, just, pray or concede to them immediately if you want to. But if you want to play it out, you're going to bring in the Ceremonious Rejections. Hopefully this has a target. It's very hard to keep Ceremonious Rejection in your hand because they're playing with Inquisition, Thoughtseize, and Collective Brutality. So they're going to see it coming. But, you know, like, it's better than no plan at all, because we're bringing it in to just hit the Ensnaring Bridge. And we bring in Relic of Progenitus to keep their graveyard empty, just in case they decide to... I mean, it has two applications. If they mill a Ensnaring Bridge in their graveyard so that they can put it back on top of their deck with Academy Ruins, you can crack Relic of Progenitus in response to that. Or, if they try to mill a good card off the top of your deck, you can, in response to that, crack Relic and draw the card right off the top of your deck. We'll take out Dismember because it has no targets, and Master Waves is just expensive. So against Smallpox, that's sort of a new deck. For the most part, you don't want to change anything. It's a very attrition-based matchup. You want to keep Aether Vial in the deck. This is not like Jund or Abzan. You need to keep Aether Vial in the deck so that you can be pitching lands from your hand to hold the discard effects and Smallpox and so on. And even if you have no lands in play, Aether Vial will at least keep letting you play creatures onto the battlefield, despite all the stupid Smallpoxes and whatever. So against Smallpox, you see some versions with Bloodghast, with Lingering Souls, and it's a card you can invest from your hand onto the battlefield if you need to crack it to draw a card. We're going to take out the Dismembers because they look pretty useless in the deck. They do play with, like, Gideon, ally of Zendikar, and maybe sometimes in some rare situations you can dismember the damn thing down. There might be some room to play Disdainful Stroke. I just don't have enough experience against this deck to know if it's good, if it's better than Relic of Progenitus, but I assume because I see Bloodghast, I see Lingering Souls, Relic of Progenitus is going to be the go-to card. And against 8-Rack, we definitely are going to bring in just 3 Relic of Progenituses to take out 3 Dismembers. The Dismembers are pretty useless. I have no idea how bold 8-Rack is to be siding in things like Death Shadow and some other creatures. I mean, they might, because they can assume that we are siding out some removal, but we still have Harbinger of the Tides in our deck, so... and Relic of Progenitus against 8-Rack can exile... What's it called? There's a card in the graveyard that gives Retrace, discard a land, 1 black, discard a land, and you have to discard a card, so you can wipe that from the graveyard and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Against Titan Shift, we're going to be bringing in the 3 Disdainful Strokes, counters Primeval Titan, counters Scapeshift. The win conditions. That's what we have it in there for. And we're going to bring in Dispel. It counters Lightning Bolt and Summoner's Pact, which are very relevant cards. And we're going to take out Dismember and Master of Waves and hope for the best. Hope for the best. I have to say the Titan Shift is still a hard matchup. What happened was, like, it used to be like a 60-40 matchup in their favor. And then they had so many upgrades, and their deck changed so much. They grew a ton. They pushed the distance by quite a bit, by like 85-15, and with these other adjustments I like can bring it back to like 75-25, but like they're still very, very far ahead. That's why the Titan Shift matchup has become so difficult. It was already like not a great matchup, but a playable matchup. You know, we scalped some matches from them, and then they with Hour of Promise, which is another sorcery that we can't deal with, and the enchantment that lets all their lands be all land types, and yeah, with those adjustments they pushed themselves very far ahead and made it much harder for us to interact with them. So yeah, that's just where we are. And if Tectonic Edge could, like, I don't know, get more popular, get more playable, maybe we could jam that in there. But I think it's like a good but not great card against them. But it would help. It would help. So we're just gonna have to like stick with. Just hope to race them. Just hope to race them. So against Counters Company, we're going to bring in 4 Dispel. Counters Collective Company, Court of Calling. It is possible that they will have the infinite mana combo on the board, but if they can't search for the missing piece to search for a Walking Ballista or the Green God that gives +2/+0/+ trample, they won't win. So Dispel is a big card against Counters Company. And we're going to take out 3 Master Waves because it's very clunky and very slow, and 1 Curse Catcher. And if you see the Kitchen Finks combo, there's a lot of room to bring in Relic of Progenituses, and I suggest you take out 2 more Curse Catchers for them. Against Storm, we're going to bring in 4 Dispel. We're going to bring in counters all the important stuff. Counters, I mean, it can counter Lightning Bolt and things like that, but the most important thing is it counters Gifts Ungiven. That is like the card of all cards. You have to make sure you keep that card under check, under control. because if that thing gets out of control, then you've lost the game. So as long as we can counter that, we should be in good shape. 4 Relic of Progenitus will keep the graveyard empty, is great against Past in Flames and Gifts Ungiven, so nails both of them at the same time. I've had a lot of games where I just basically won because I had 2 relics on the board and I just kept eating 2 cards from my opponent's graveyard. They could never get the right density of cards to win the game. And we'll bring in 2 Disdainful Stroke, playable in this matchup because the 2 most important cards are Gifts Ungiven and Past in Flames, and this card counters both of them. We're going to take out Spreading Seas. They're totally useless. They're just a 2-color deck, and they have all the mana to work with. We're going to take out 1 Master of Waves, leaving 2 Master of Waves in the deck. The Master of Waves can help stabilize a board if they bring in Empty the Warrens. Occasionally, they'll have Goblin Electromancer and Empty the Warrens, and we can attack through it with Master of Waves. Occasionally, we are at a standoff, and I can creep up a Vial to 4, play Master of Waves, and then finish them off in 1 shot. Yeah, I think it has value in this matchup, and we're taking it, but we can't have too many of them. We can't have too top-heavy of a deck because we do need to keep like 1 mana up for Dispel and Relic of Progenitus very often. We're going to take out 2 Mararegery for that reason, and we're going to take out all the Phantasmal Images. This card is atrociously a liability because of Grape Shot. It will just die to anything, and it's a little too fragile, in my opinion, to try to, I don't know, position yourself in some way where you get a Master of Waves followed by a Phantasmal Image. It's just too much wishful thinking. Against Dredge, we're going to bring in all our relics. This is great. We have 4 Relic of Progenituses against Dredge. We'll take out 3 Dismembers, and again, we'll take out Phantasmal Image. This is another matchup, I think, Phantasmal Image. A bit vulnerable because it can just get shot down for 1 damage because of Conflagrate. Against Elves, we'll bring in 4 Dispel to counter Collected Company and Court of Calling, most important cards. I still have no idea what we're supposed to be taking out against Elves, and I have gone one way or another with a lot of cards, so I am just taking out, we're just hedging against everything. We'll take out 1 Master of Waves, a Curse Catcher, Spreading Seas, and Harbinger of the Tides, and hopefully that doesn't screw the deck up too much. And the last deck that I have here is Ad Nauseam. We're going to bring in the Dispels. 4 Dispels counters Ad Nauseam, which is the entire deck. The whole thing rests on that thing. We're going to bring in 3 Disdainful Stroke, and we're going to take out 3 Dismembers. They're useless. 3 Master of Waves. They're too expensive, and 1 Harbinger of the Tides. So yeah, that is these are all the matchups for this deck list. Pre-Ixalan Merfolk, and from here on out, I'll be playtesting a lot of blue-green Simic Merfolk for you guys. So that concludes this deck tech, this sideboard guide. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about Phantasmal Image. I hope you learned a lot from this. Thanks again to all my patrons supporting me on Patreon. This has been Nikachu talking about the sideboard guide for October 2017.